All right, well, welcome everybody. I'll just have Mr. DeVeronica give me the share screen rights. We want to welcome you tonight to yet another Q&A session. We have some information to share with you tonight, and certainly we'll have time to answer your specific questions regarding the reopening of schools at the secondary level in West Irondequoit. So with me tonight, I've got some fellow panelists. We'll go through and do some introductions, and then I'll pull up the information. We'll go through it and answer your questions along the way. Those questions can go right in the Q&A section, not the chat, the Q&A. That way we can save those. And for those that we don't directly address tonight, we'll put out a FAQ, but we'll try to answer all of them in the best way that we can. So Karyn, can I have you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Karyn Ryan. I'm the Supervisor of Student Services K-12. Welcome everybody, and I'm glad to be here.
Alecia?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Alecia Zipp-McLaughlin, the IHS principal. Thank you so much for sharing your evening with us.
Maryanne?
Hi, everyone. Maryanne Heiman, principal of Dake Junior High. Thanks for being here.
And finally, Dan.
Howdy, folks. Dan Fullerton, K-12 Director of Technology. Thrilled you're here with us tonight.
So now we have those introductions out of the way. You should see a PowerPoint screen just saying the reopening of our schools. Panelists, is that what everybody sees? Can kind of be my eyes for me? Okay, great. So, you know, one of the primary questions we've gotten a lot as we're talking to parents and even some students, and looking forward to seeing some students tomorrow too in a Q&A session that we're doing with our high school 912ers tomorrow. How will the start of this school year feel different than the spring? As we, in March, were directed to close brick and mortar schools and go to full remote. And really the best way to characterize that spring was a crisis response. We are very proud of how quickly our teachers and our staff were able to mobilize to make sure that the students had the materials and the devices that they needed, that they had access to information through hotspots and partnerships with the Irondequoit Public Library. Our food service program did a phenomenal job delivering those meals, but truly it was a crisis response. So things like teacher check-ins through Zoom and those office hours, really in this school year moving forward, it's all about teacher-led instruction. And that'll be synchronous or real-time instruction, and it'll also be asynchronous. Teachers will push out content, push out material for students to access, play, rewind, watch again, interact with as part of their learning cycle. The crisis response had some flexible assignments. They might have been daily or weekly assignments. In the remote model, it really is. There's 2 days of instruction in person and 3 days where students will remotely learn. But for all intents and purposes, teachers are still planning to deliver that 5 days of content, just broken up in different segments, both synchronously and asynchronously. For our crisis response, we were tracking student engagement, but attendance, daily attendance wasn't taken. Now, moving forward, daily attendance will be taken, whether it's period by period when students are with us in person or engaging in full remote instruction on those synchronous days, or participation-based or student-entered-based attendance during their virtual learning. The focus on instruction in the spring was really, really super focused on review and pared down to those essentials. Now, teachers have had time to plan this summer and work collaboratively with teachers from last year to really craft scope and sequence and curriculum that will take students where they are and move them forward so they have all of the skills that they need. Last year at the secondary level, we felt it was important to not hold students harmless by the situation that they might be in. If they had access issues, if a family member was sick, there was a lot of unknown happening in our students' lives in the spring. And so we wanted to make sure that the evidence that we used about their learning didn't weigh them down in terms of what they were being faced with in the spring. Now we're focusing on instruction moving forward from day one, and students will be graded. There will be accountability for assignments and work that's due, and we will calculate numeric averages each quarter. There will be assessments. Some assessments might be delivered online. There might be different formats to them, but there will be assessments at the end of the unit, throughout the unit in a multitude of ways. Materials are going to be centered within Schoology. We're really falling back on that learning management system as our single platform, and that will provide centralized access for students and parents. And so parents, you'll be receiving some information on how you can access your student's Schoology account. You can see their posts, you can see their assignments. You can't see other students' work, but you at least can use that as a communication tool, a communication platform with your students. And so I'm going to turn it over to Alecia Zipp-McLaughlin, the principal of Irondequoit High School, to talk us through a bit about the hybrid model, and then we'll pause and we'll address any of the questions that have come in. Take it away, Principal McLaughlin.
Thank you. So just to give you a basic overview of what our hybrid model is going to look like, this will be aligned grades 7 through 12. We've spent a lot of time working together to provision a model that would best support families as well as our instructional stance. So students will be assigned a cohort, either a blue cohort or a gold cohort. Typically, students with last names A through LIN will be expected to attend in person at Dake and IHS on Mondays and Thursdays, and then they will be engaging in their remote learning on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, with the gold cohort doing just the opposite. We do know many of you have reached out to us with specialized circumstances. We appreciate that two-way communication and that you trust us on behalf of your family to align you with the cohort that works best for all of the children in your family. We will continue to ask any questions that you have regarding requests for interchanging cohorts. But know that for the most part, the blue and gold with those last name delineations is how we are looking to balance our numbers on both campuses during the days. In addition, we have health screening. We're going to be asking families and staff and faculty to engage in that self-check as another preventative measure. Before students come to campus, you will be receiving a question or a couple of questions similar to the COVID-esque questions if you visited a doctor's office recently, just to help us have an indication that you are monitoring that at home before getting on school buses and coming to the building. And then we will be checking temperatures at the entry doors for Dake and IHS as another added layer of screening for students arriving. For grades 7 through 12, we do have staggered arrival and staggered dismissal. So while we have 50% of our students on campus on a given day, we are further reducing the number of students entering and leaving our buildings to best provision for that social distancing and looking for our masks and some of our other checks that we do. So we are going to have a 7:45 a.m. entry and then an 8 a.m. entry. For the high school, the 9th and 10th graders will enter at 7:45. The juniors and seniors will enter at 8. Ms. Heiman, do you want to quickly add for 7th and 8th grade?
Sure, thank you. For the 7th graders, their arrival time will be 7:45, and the 8th grade arrival time will be 8.
So once students are on campus, we are asking for families to plan as closely to those times as possible, again, to continue to aid us in our efforts to provide the safest environment that we can for students. At the 7:45 and the 8 o'clock, our students will be receiving breakfast to go and reporting directly to their first period classes so that we're reducing any of that time where students are gathering or standing. Again, at 2:45, 11th and 12th graders will be dismissed to control that exit out. And at 3 o'clock, our 9th and 10th graders. Ms. Heiman.
Yep, and for Dake at 2:45, that is our 7th grade dismissal, and 3 p.m. is our 8th grade dismissal.
You will also notice in the hybrid learning schedule, we have fielded some questions for students who have IEPs or 504s. For our 12-1-4 grouping, if you have a child in that class, you can expect to send your child to school 5 days a week. We will be provisioning instruction for them all 5 days on campus. And for 811 at both Dake and IHS, and then for the 15-1 at IHS, we have 4 days on campus in person, with that Wednesday being available for everybody for office hours. Additionally, there will be some students with our ICT programs and CT and ENL that will be able to access some supports on Wednesday at both Dake and IHS. Those will be communicated directly to your home, either through the email process or through a letter, so that you have clear understanding of which students are expected when. As always, please feel free to email us with any questions that you think of. We are more than happy to walk you through that. Next slide, please. So I covered a little bit about the in-person instruction and the days of the week that students will be here. In addition to the Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday, or variation thereof based on level of need for our students, we are also continuing our work this year with social emotional learning. And so we do have check-in activities, check out to get to know our students as individuals. We are highly encouraging our first few days on campus for classrooms to develop that sense of community, to get to know one another, and just be another layer of support. So you will see additional communication coming out from both Ms. Heiman and myself around some of those SEL focus areas for each building throughout the year. The remote learning for students in the hybrid model, Mrs. Finter talked a little bit about earlier, but these would be the days opposite of when the students are cohorted and expected on campus. And so while they're at home, those are the asynchronous activities that Mrs. Finter spoke to. And teachers are planning for students to engage in those activities when they are not on campus learning. There will be additional information shared later in this presentation if you selected fully remote learning, so that you understand what that looks like for your child as well. On Wednesdays, we mentioned that a few students will be on campus based on that level of need and service. And so most students will be at home learning. And so on those days, those are still mandatory days. We will share postings. Teachers will have some office hours available for drop-in. Those are not the only times when parents or students can check in with teachers. Students can always access their teachers through the Schoology courses, through emails. Many teachers have Remind apps with multiple ways of getting a hold and asking questions. It also allows teachers some time to give some strategic feedback to students to continue to engage in their work.
One question that's come up, and it may be in the Q&A window, is why did we pick Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday over 2 consecutive days? And over the summer, we've had over 120 people, staff members, parents, students, administrators come together to really look at, as various sets of guidance were released by the CDC, Department of Health, New York State finally in mid-July. We looked at some options and what would be best. And we worked very closely with our Director of Operations, Mr. John Conti, and looked at the cleaning protocols and the sanitization protocols that would take place every night in the building. And after learning from Mr. Conti and his crew, what they're able to accomplish, we felt that it is safe to have students come in on Monday, then come in again on Thursday, and having a different group in on Tuesday and a different group in on Friday because of what those nightly routines will be. And even working with classroom teachers to further help support distancing in the classrooms and using even just different sets of materials on blue days versus gold days will help to ensure the safety and well-being. From an instructional standpoint, to have 5 days in between in-person experiences with kids, just that instructional balance with the assurances around the safety and the cleaning, we felt having those days was a better fit for us and for the community. Okay, as we pause here, any other questions that have come in, panelists, that it's an appropriate time now to address, or should we keep looking at some of the hybrid model facts?
There's just one I want to pipe in about. So a question came in about what peak time is. So peak time is going to occur on Wednesdays across Dake and IHS. So students will be placed into a peak group, and peak stands for promoting excellence and kindness. And that is going to be a time where students will check in via Zoom or Remind or some way to connect with an adult just to establish some relationships. And these groups will be mixed between cohorts and also include hybrid and remote students. So it will really just give us an opportunity to build community, and that will also be a way for the District 712 to take attendance for students on those Wednesdays.
It'll be a great opportunity for our students to get some of that, maybe just in some time support they might need, a little tech support boost, a little SEL time management boost. Really, it's a great opportunity to further interact with kids, with our staff. Thanks, Mr. DeVeronica. All right, Ms. McLaughlin, more about the hybrid model?
Continuing on, yes, our classrooms, materials, and masking. I think I did see a couple of questions about supplies. We are having our supply lists updated to be more reflective of the synchronous versus asynchronous learning structure. As soon as those are up, we are hoping to have updates later this week, and then Ms. Heiman and I will send out a message to folks to go in and check those out. Some of our classroom materials will need to be shared, but we are planning to limit that as much as possible. And again, those first 4 days with staff will absolutely, we will spend some time helping to bring everybody on the same page with the disinfection protocols. And then those first day of school for students, we will have multiple lessons to teach them how to be as safe as they need to be for themselves, for our school, and for our community at large. We are asking that students wear their masks. We're going to require that masks are worn. The structured mask breaks during the day for us will mostly be at lunchtime, unless there is a class that is outside with that 12 feet or more parameter. We still are exploring that option. At this time, we are asking and requiring that all students and staff wear masks throughout the day. We do have our classroom layouts with 6 feet of social distancing. We have hand sanitizer that we've planned for every classroom and some hallways. Every office will have the sanitizer. And we also have the approved wipes available for any classroom or office throughout the building, both Dake and IHS. We have worked with multiple stakeholders to help us look at our plans and try to find our blind sides and poke Swiss cheese holes through any areas they think that we could strengthen or improve. And so we really were doing our best to look first at those large group gatherings like the hallways, the commons areas, and looking to reduce the numbers in those spaces, which we've done with those staggered entrance and exit criteria. We also have some staggered hallway traffic release times. Looks a little differently at Dake, but at Dake and at the IHS, we are not looking to just release students into the hallway and send them to their next class. We are looking to control that as much as we can. Students can carry backpacks, grades 7 through 12. We are starting without lockers. We do know that in a previous Q&A, there was a question about what we do with wintertime with the boots and the coats. We know we're gonna have to revisit that, but to start the year, we are looking to minimize the amount of time that students need to spend in the hallway, the amount of contact time, and just any reduction of that that mixing of students between classes.
And really to help support that, some of the materials that students will, that may be required for their courses, like heavy textbooks, those kinds of things, those will be set home with students as needed, so that really they're not expected to carry, lots of heavy things with them every day. It's really just their student device and some additional resources they may need for their courses. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Both cafeterias have been restructured. So instead of those large cafeteria tables, we have taken it to the individual testing desks because it's easier for us to ensure that 6-foot safety. Students will still be able to socialize and have conversations. We're just gonna make sure that that spacing is contained. We also have some additional areas that we're looking at for lunches to further reduce the numbers of students in any one concentrated area. And as we receive updated guidance from the CDC and Health Department, we will look to continue to stay up to date with that and respond to allow more of that socialization time as information becomes available for us. So we have our EMCC students who travel between IHS and BOCES. Again, you will receive a letter from me that indicates the days that you are expected to be live on campus and the days that you would expect to report to catch your bus to go to EMCC. Basically, students who are enrolled in EMCC courses will attend EMCC off their IHS cohort days. So if you have the last name between A through LAN and you're in the blue cohort group, that means you will come to IHS on Mondays and Thursdays only for those IHS classes. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, you will report to door 3, where you will catch your bus to BOCES, return from BOCES, and then go straight home, so that we're not crossing and mixing populations from one school to another. Music, art, and PE. We also have many provisions in place to preserve as much of the comprehensive feel of our high school as we possibly can. There will be additional information coming out for music, art, and PE in upcoming letters from both principals, Dake and high school.
So there was a question that came in about, kind of going along with some of the comprehensive nature of the high school in particular around dual enrollment programs. So we are still partnering with all of our higher ed institutions, whether it's RIT, MCC, and others, to provide those opportunities for our students in addition to our outstanding AP program. And so those courses are still available. Students will work directly with those teachers to connect to the enrollment information and registration information about those programs once we start in session. Okay. About, some of the questions that have come up, I think some of them are about remote learning, and so we're going to be switching over to that. A question about students not using lockers, and maybe this is more of a Dake question, Heiman, about students' phones. What should students do with their phones if they're not to have their phones in their locker?
Mm-hmm. We are still going to have the cell phone policy of them not having it out during the instructional day, so they can have it with them, and we are just asking that they store them in their backpacks and silence them or turn them off during the day, so they can really participate in instruction and be fully present during the school day. So they can still carry them to and from school, but they should be stored away during the instructional day.
There's a question around opting out of band or instrumental music lessons. And, one of the things that we've worked very closely with Mr. Steve Zugelder, our amazing coordinator for performing arts and music, and really talking about trying to get students into the routine of school, starting the school year, phasing in certainly virtual lessons, and perhaps very small groups to come together that have additional social distance to be able to start practicing together. And there's a series of other safety precautions that can be taken in addition to distancing with band instruments to further diminish any aerosols, in addition to going outside if the weather allows it. And so really starting off slowly and building through the year as guidance allows and as common sense allows, frankly. So before, making some of those decisions, it may be something that families kind of want to weigh with their student around, that student's interest certainly in the music program and their passion for it. We certainly want to be able to promote that and know that we're going to approach it very safely. And again, using things like virtual check-ins, virtual lessons, even on those Wednesdays, to help students maintain a certain level of proficiency with their instruments, and then ease into. We certainly don't have any plans for concerts or performances during the first semester of the year, but we'll certainly keep everybody in the loop as those decisions may shift and change as guidance allows.
Mrs. Finter, I know I'm seeing a couple of questions at the high school level for drop-off times. If you have students who are spanning drop-off times, so I see the 9th and 12th grader, and there are some families that share between Dake and IHS, especially in inclement weather, we do not expect the children to wait outside. We will absolutely be able to accommodate. This is just a mechanism for us to control the number of people coming in. So as long as you are close to one or the other, if we need to flex and respond, we'll do that internally. You don't have to worry about that on your end. Just as one extra piece for seniors, we do recognize that this will be yet another less than traditional year. And so trying to preserve some of those privileges that seniors have earned in the past while also being responsive to the health and safety that the global pandemic brings, and not being able to provision all of those privileges. We are going to reserve the Dake door 3 for our seniors so that they have their own entrance and exit. It doesn't mean that they cannot come in the front door. It just means that we're provisioning that if they choose to use that as just one special entrance, since they've earned their time into the senior year. Okay. Supply lists, we will have posted the links on both the district website and our school websites. When we are ready for those, you will receive communication from either a district email or one of the two of us as principals of the building.
There are a few questions regarding requiring masks and masks wearing and changes to the plan. And right now our plan is students will be wearing masks, staff will be wearing masks. We know that the guidance at first that was released by the state had some different language, but as that guidance was shifted and changed by the state, we also shifted and changed our stance. And in addition, from hearing feedback from families and staff. And so it's our intent that students will wear masks, and certainly at the secondary level, with some of that teaching component around it, why it's important to wear those masks, we will hold to that. In terms of additional guidance and who do we turn to if we have to close and infection rates, we really are in close concert with the Monroe County Department of Health. Dr. Mendoza speaks weekly or just about weekly with all of the area superintendents and will be the first call if and when there are any positive cases within the district. We really lean on the Department of Health to direct us in terms of what steps to take. They will support us with guidance in terms of contact tracing and communication, and really to make sure that there are no loose ends and that we are following the appropriate Department of Health protocols. Again, another question around cleaning materials, and then we'll switch over to remote learning because there are even some more questions about that. Desks and chairs to be cleaned in between classes. So we're asking students to really follow great protocols around hand hygiene and hand washing. Every classroom will have hand sanitizer. Some classrooms even have sinks and soap available for students. And in addition to that, there are approved wipes. We have to use products that follow health and safety guidelines that schools have to adhere to. And so each classroom should have a container of those wipes in it. Again, teachers are going to be strategic in where they're placing students, so there's not a potential for overlap in some of those desks per se. But in addition to that, those wipes can be used to wipe off a surface in between students. But again, part of that is the good hygiene protocols that will be supporting our students in learning and making just part of the routine. All right, we'll take it away and talk a little more about remote learning and then go back to some of these great questions.
So for fully remote learning, on the screen you can see the schedule. So it looks pretty similar to the students that are opting for hybrid learning schedules. So students will be assigned to either the blue cohort, which will come Monday, which will be on synchronous lessons Monday and Thursday, and then the gold cohort would be synchronous lessons on Tuesday and Friday. So during their classes, students that are opting for full remote instruction will log into Microsoft Teams and they will video conference into their classrooms with watching their teacher provide the mini lesson or some form of instruction to get them started with their independent work for the class period. The teacher may then choose to dismiss them to work independently or may set up some structures for them to engage online via Schoology discussion boards or a OneNote document with either students that are physically present in the classroom or other students that are also remotely learning. They would be doing that, so they may not necessarily need to be video conferencing for the entire class period, but we would ask that they log in at the beginning of their class period, get some information from their teacher, and then follow their teacher's directions for that. For the study halls or lunches that are in their schedule, they will not need to video conference for those, and that will be some time for them to have some time and then also kind of catch up on some other work throughout their day. You can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So students will receive instruction using this means in all of their courses in order to maintain participation in a comprehensive program. This piece about accessing materials or specialized programs on Wednesdays, that is Most of that is for IHS students. There are some programs that are not able to operate on the student devices due to the capabilities. So there may be some need for students to access materials or certain programs on Wednesdays, but that will be communicated to students directly about that. If there's a concern for coming to the building, teachers will work with individual families to support them and come up with a plan to ensure that students have access via another means. Teachers will also implement activities for social emotional learning to just ensure that we're checking in with our students, even if they are working at home or if they're coming in for a hybrid model. So again, like we mentioned earlier, Wednesdays we have our peak groups that will be running, and those are building wide across Dake and also IHS. And then there'll also be other opportunities for teachers to check in with students using various forms of communication and to ensure that we are engaging with students and making sure that they feel connected to the building, even if they're not coming in for classes in person. And then the full remote instruction, so if you opted in for full remote, that will be for the first quarter. And if you determine that you want your child to participate in hybrid, then you would have to communicate to most likely the building principal, but we will share communication about what that process will look like as we get into the first quarter and have just some more information and guidance on that. Go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So for both models, here are just some considerations that we looked into, and we did tap into our district emergency management team, emergency response team, and really had a lot of stakeholders involved in this process in order to make sure that we were supporting students as best as possible, whether they were hybrid or whether they were working remotely. So attendance will be recorded, so we do need to report attendance daily. So that will occur during in-person instruction for those participating in synchronous and asynchronous during the day as well. So we will communicate what that attendance will look like for students that are working asynchronously. We are looking through some different options for how that will work to make sure we track daily attendance for those students. For students that are reporting to school in person, teachers will take attendance like they typically do using our Infinite Campus system. And that will also go for students that are working synchronously from home. Attendance will be taken during that class period as well for them. So it's important that they log in during their class period if they are working from home and streaming into the class. Grading will be consistent across both models, and feedback, as always, will be provided to students so they can apply their revisions to their work in order to demonstrate proficiency. So in our March model, when we were in kind of crisis response, we engaged in some different grading practices, but for this upcoming school year, where the hold harmless policy will not be in effect for this upcoming school year. And we are working with staff to ensure that grades are updated weekly in Infinite Campus, so you as families have clear communication and understand what assignments are due and what grades your child is receiving on those assignments. A numeric average will be calculated for each course. So I know last year some of the non-credit bearing courses received letter grades. This year, all of our grading will be numeric averages for each course. For students, whether they are working in person or are they working remotely, our code of conduct and handbooks will be followed. So we'll be sure to communicate that information to students whether or not they are attending in person. And then we are still in the process of reviewing extracurricular activities just to determine which ones can be engaged in socially distanced or remotely. So we're making those decisions right now as a building. And then if they're offered remotely, the activities will be available for students that are engaging in both models, so both hybrid and remote learning models. We've done a lot of reflecting on communication, and we know that it's important to continue to communicate with our families and students and have you communicate with us. So open communication is really important, but we're also trying to balance the amount of communication because we know it can sometimes be overwhelming. So we are using Remind, Schoology, or emails to communicate, and parents this year will have access to their child's Schoology, so they'll be receiving a course code specific to their child where they actually, student code, where they will be able to look into Schoology and see what their students' courses look like, what assignments they have due, and just to gather some more information. And then we'll also be across 712 creating grade level folders that the students in each grade will have access to, and we will be putting information in there that's important, such as some of our announcements, any upcoming things that are important to share with the grade level community of that grade. We're also going to be using Schoology as our learning management system. So teachers, all teachers 712 will be using that to house instructional materials and tasks. So again, families will have access to that to check in with their student and engage in conversations about what assignments there are and what needs to get done. And we'll also be using Remind and Infinite Campus. Those will be consistent communication tools to let you know about upcoming events and student progress. So we're working on some just informational components in order to share with families and students prior to opening. So that will be forthcoming. So you have an understanding of the different technology tools that are available and how we will use communication to support you and your child during this school year. And you can go to anything to add, Karyn, I think?
Yeah, so that, well, just as a few questions come in,
Sure.
there's some questions in particular regarding remote learning. And so, you know, just to kind of lay it out simply, if I am a blue student, I go to my classes in person on Monday, and then Tuesday I'm at home. My teachers have provisioned for me in Schoology resources that I need to access on my own, and it could be teacher-led resources that I need to access in order to engage with the content, in order to build my knowledge and understanding, in order for me to practice my skills. So when I think about a traditional classroom, 5 days a week, 42 minutes a day, the teacher breaks up instruction into groups or chunks of time, right? So there might be a warm-up where students are individually kind of reflecting on what the guiding question is for the day, writing down all of the things that they know about the topic. Maybe they're responding to an image or a cartoon or a graphic. You know, sometimes teachers use those kinds of things as well. Then there is some time for some direct instruction where teachers deliver 10 to 15 minutes worth of content, and then students practice using that content. Well, as a classroom teacher, I might look at my 10 minutes, 5 days a week, my 50 minutes worth of content, and I'm going to push that out so students can access it asynchronously. Why asynchronously or not in real time? Students can rewind. They can re-listen, they can reread, they can access it at a time that works for them in their family schedules, especially if they may have other responsibilities at home during the day. So we did hear from students that they really appreciated, as the spring rolled on and those teacher-created or teacher-led learning opportunities were pushed out, they found them very valuable and very strong to interact with and help them understand. Then when kids are back in person, that time, that mini lesson time could be even further shortened to clear up any misconceptions that the students in front of the teacher might have. That lesson would be broadcast out to our students who are engaging in full remote learning, clear up any questions, and then students are back to some of that asynchronous independent work. There's lots of opportunities for time and support. So while all students aren't going to be in the building at the same time, there are still times during the day where they could seek out extra help. They could leverage the technology tools to asynchronously ask for help and support from their teachers. So there'll be lots of time. But we try to provide our teachers, through our wonderful curriculum teams, some models that will help inform their planning. There may very well be some mandated engagement every day. It won't be like the spring where students, you know, could kind of procrastinate. They're really going to be held accountable on that day-to-day basis. Other thoughts about remote learning principles, or Karyn or Dan, that I'm missing?
I think you hit those key points.
Okay, thanks. And then there are some questions about orientation and tours of the building, especially for our incoming 7th graders at Dake who are new to the building and incoming 9th graders who are new to the high school. Principals, do you want to take on those questions?
Sure.
Sure.
I can start, Alecia, if that's okay. I sent out communication earlier this morning, late morning, about 7th grade orientation. So we are planning to hold in-person orientation at Dake next Thursday and Friday. Students will be coming with their GEM team and cohort group. So if you have questions about that, there was a summer mailing that assigned the GEM groups for that. We are doing that to minimize the number of students in the building at one time. So we're going to start with a socially distanced full group conversation and just welcome, and then students will be broken up into smaller groups to engage in some socially distanced team building and then also a guided tour. If students are unable to attend, we are going to create a videotape of different areas of the building to get them acclimated with the layout of Dake, and also share some key information so they can also be included on the orientation virtually. And we anticipate those materials being posted the following week at some point on our website, and then also in our Schoology courses.
And at the high school, for our incoming 9th graders, we will have our orientation on September 2nd. More information will come to you soon. It is going to be virtual, and it's under the guidance of our fantastic link leaders. And in addition to our 2 teacher link leaders, we have several upperclassmen who have volunteered and who are beginning to engage in a training series. So not only will they help guide the incoming freshmen with any questions they have, it's kind of a built-in mentor for students, so they know somebody in grades 10 through 12 before they begin their school year. They'll have their contact information to be able to reach out to them with questions. Similarly, we have a new student orientation for any new families, grades 10 through 12, where we will run through the same types of question and answer. There will be welcome videos created for students, in addition to the logistics. Just to walk through right before school starts, I'll send out a video of the social distancing so you can see what the hallways look like. You can see what your entrance routine is going to look like. You can see what your classrooms are going to look like. All the different ways that we're indicating the 6 feet positioned around the building, our unidirectional stairs. I'll send that video out probably right before the holiday weekend to give folks some time. If you're a family with a student who is just experiencing a ton of stress and anxiety over seeing or walking their path for their schedule, please just email me and reach out to me. I'm happy to walk you through that so that we can relieve whatever stress and anxiety students have before they enter.
Okay, just in looking at some of the questions, there are a few questions, Karyn, that maybe you can help support. So, just to reiterate, the students with IEPs that might be attending 5 days versus 3 or 4, depending, could you just maybe review that for our families and folks?
Yes, because there were a couple questions on that. So our students in the 1214 classroom will attend 5 days a week. Students in our 811 classroom and consult program will come 4 days a week, along with our 15 one-to-one students at the high school will come 4 days a week. Our integrated co-taught students will follow the hybrid model of their gen ed peers, but on Wednesdays, there will be additional instructional time for them to come. It'll be 3 hours a day. And for students within that resource room, that Wednesday, they'll have opportunities to have work remotely with their resource room teachers, or if they need additional assistance, that teacher can be available to them.
Great, thanks. And then there's some questions around completing hands-on labs in science. And so in working with New York State, there is some guidance around virtual labs, but there are some labs that just, you need that hands-on component. So looking at labs at a micro scale, thinking about chemistry and some of the living environment labs, looking at leveraging simulations to provide data sets for students and to show some of the phenomena in that way. And then also to use and some shared materials, thinking about some of our physics classrooms in particular, but using proper cleaning protocols in between groups of students to really help support that. And so even though, some of the concerns around the cleaning supplies, the volume of supplies, we've been working very closely with our director of operations to help support some of the ordering of those materials. And we will continually revisit our supplies and our processes and support, support our students that we're able to the extent that we're able to. Other questions that are coming in, principals, any hot questions to answer from your lenses?
I'm trying to scan through because they're popping in.
Let me just remind everybody, this is Mr. DeVeronica, that any questions in the chat aren't going to be answered. If you have a question, please put it in the Q&A. Thank you.
So we have already touched upon, oh, go ahead, Dan, sorry.
Sorry, have a couple questions around computer issues, technical issues, things like that. Just very briefly, we have done a lot with laptops that were turned in over the summer, refreshing all of those devices, updating internet filtering and endpoint management on those. So they should work much better come this fall if they were turned in over the summer. So we cleaned those up. We also have a new help website for students and parents, WICSD.tech. Brand new, finished up round 1 of it today, actually. So hoping to use that to provide more support for our parents and students. And you'll also find an email on that website and throughout all our websites to provide additional support to parents and students. We're still looking at what additional support hours might look like into the evenings to provide greater support for our parents and students outside the standard school day.
There was a couple questions just about transitioning between classes. So I know there was some conversation early in our planning about teachers potentially shifting classes to come to students, but due to the complexity of the schedule, for Dake specifically, we are going to have students transition between each class. We are staggering our transition time by grade level. Something we were able to put in place is that students that may have had a class over at the high school, because a lot of our world language classes take place over there, as well as some of our music courses, we have provision to have those classes be at Dake, and the students will travel over to teach those courses. So students will not be leaving the building to go to IHS during the day. They will be remaining at Dake for their coursework, so that will limit some of the transitions between cohorts of students between the two buildings.
Okay, so there is a question about the class of 2021 and some of the senior activities.
Yeah. Yes, so we are working diligently to plan and provision for our seniors to keep as many traditions alive as possible. So homecoming week is one of the first large weeks on campus. We are still going to hold some of the traditional components of homecoming week. Obviously, we're on hold for any football game at this point, but we are looking to involve the pinnacle of the week, involve our community with some voting around our homecoming floats. And then the other senior activities, I do have plans to meet with the senior groups across the building to hear from them about which traditions are most meaningful to them, give them some say and some voice into how we find a solution that is safe but also preserves some of those high points for them as they celebrate their year, and continue to revisit those as the year evolves. We're certainly hoping that we're able to do more toward a traditional experience as the year goes on and everybody is being responsible with their precautions.
Mr. Fullerton, if someone missed a window of time to turn in a device, have their device updated, are there opportunities for them to do that?
Unfortunately, we are booked up until the start of school for refreshes on items we've already committed to. But once school starts, the devices should still function. They will have some more updates to go through. And as we move through the year, there will be opportunities to drop off the laptop for support. We will try and turn it around in the space of roughly 24 hours while the student has a loaner device and then get that device back to them. So that's our plan, although it may take us a little while to catch up with those devices we didn't get to this summer.
Okay. And then from either building's perspective, the idea if a student changes from hybrid instruction to remote instruction, will their teachers change? Will their schedules change? Maybe one of you can answer that.
From hybrid to remote, they are assigned to that cohort group, and that cohort is, they have the same schedules, the 9-period schedules. So regardless of whether they are hybrid or fully remote, their teacher would still be aligned to their cohort and to their last name in that capacity. It just helps us at that 10-week mark, if a family is feeling differently and feels like they do want to transition in, it's less for the student and for the teacher to transition by keeping those teacher variables the same.
At Dake, we are looking at our numbers of students that are opting for full remote, and there is a potential to have full remote sections of instruction just to allow for more comprehensive learning for the students that are all working remotely. So there may be a potential that that would shift, but we would work on that as a case-by-case basis and communicate that to families and students.
Okay, there's a question, Becky's question about PE for all remote instruct students. And so our fantastic PE teachers are putting together class materials and lessons to support PE, both synchronous and asynchronous and real-time versus at home. And so we'll promote health and physical fitness for all students, no matter if they're with us in person or engaging remotely. And PE is a state requirement, state mandate. Every year students have to participate and earn their PE credit. Schedules seem to be a big question too. We talked about that a bit. Now that, you know, the air quote official deadline is passed to sign up for full remote learning, we're still making some of those section size adjustments to schedules, but we're hoping that within the next week and a half or so to get those out and available to families. We know that this puts a strain on some of the supply list shopping. We recognize that, you know, right now is a good time to go and purchase some of those supplies. And we do have supply lists on the district website, but know that it is quite all right to pare down your purchases. You know, really what students will need certainly is their device, some writing utensils, highlighter or two, and something to write on, couple of notebooks to carry them through the day, and folders for any of the paper materials that they might get. We've asked and are working with our teachers to take a look at those supply lists and right size them based on the conditions, knowing that so much of our student work will be digital. Other questions? What about when a child gets sick, and whether it's COVID or not? How do we handle remote instruction? I know Principal McLaughlin, we talked about that a bit today.
We did. So if they are sick, obviously our first concern is that they rest and get the attention that they need to feel better. just in the same way that if a student was sick and needed to miss a few days of instruction, teachers, school counselors, admin would work with them to get them caught up. So we still can certainly help with that structure. There also will still be the materials loaded on Schoology for them to access that. And if the unfortunate time comes that somebody is either diagnosed with an illness that will keep them out longer or exposed to a family member that would keep them out longer, then we will engage with you around how we make that remote learning an option during that elongated time. Other than that, please just continue to keep that communication open. We really do want to support our students, but we care about their health, and know that this is stressful for them, and trying to manage and keep up with the pace of a high school schedule while also not feeling well. We're not going to maximize their instructional capability at that point. So just keep us in the communication loop, and we will certainly help get you back on track.
If I can pop in quick, there's a question about HVAC filters, what we're doing there. I can't speak to all of the details myself, but having talked to our executive director of buildings and grounds several times, we have contracted with our district engineers and architects looking at all of our systems to make sure that we optimize the flow of air through our buildings and hallways, along with the level of filtering. At some point, too tight a filter, you don't get enough airflow. So they've been working through that at all the buildings to optimize our air handling systems, including looking at the nurses' offices and making sure that those are exhausting directly outside and not recirculated air.
There's a question around, they drift. Study halls. Let's see, if my child was scheduled to take 2 classes and was going to have study halls and in-person instruction, do they have to stay in school for study halls? We want to minimize any unneeded exposure. We agree, and we recognize, right, it is a balance between providing time for students to attend to their studies and attend to their work, seek out support as needed, but also to make that productive time and not just time where they're off task and not focusing. So the buildings are working very closely to make sure that for instance, seniors that might have had an independent study, can we put those at the beginning or end of their day, which might mean a late arrival or an early dismissal for them. And then other study halls that might occur throughout the day, how do we minimize those? How do we really use that time for students to engage in their work, engage in their instruction, and not be idle for so long. So counselors are working through that and working to support some of the student choices there. And then again, some more questions about music and band and some of those options. And as we said, students that have taken an instrument and are towards the commencement end of that work, we certainly don't want to diminish their passion and love for that pursuit, right? It is a great thing that students do when they engage musically. And so, working with Steve Zugelder to really structure those meetings and focus those meetings in a safe way, using our large spaces so that they have 12 feet, using some of the recently investigated methods to minimize risk and aerosols within playing, and to do things like virtual lessons to provide that coaching and one-on-one support for students as they're practicing their instruments, or small group, using that Wednesday time to help support that, so that way students can still participate. Some other questions. There was a question around student handwriting and completing handwritten work and using that in a digital world. And we recognize, one of the most heartbreaking stories I heard last spring was a student who was trying really, really hard in particular in her math class to do the problems that she was assigned. They were lengthy problems, if you can imagine, in some of the upper levels of math. And she didn't have the technical support to be able to take pictures of her work and upload it into Schoology. She just didn't have that capacity. And so that just added more frustration and more, more to her plate than really, was intended. So, as we look at what are some of the options, certainly if students are engaged in the hybrid model, having those in-person instruction days would be a way for them to turn in some of that handwritten work. Using some of the tools available to them in either of the buildings to do that as well, but also teaching the students some of those tools and workarounds that they have access to through those lessons, especially on Wednesdays, is a great way to do that. And also to think about, what does that mean for our teachers and how can we do that, given that even some colleges now are full remote in terms of their instruction in upper levels of mathematics, and how can we help support our students to even get ready for that? So questions on if a child has a remote day, do they have to log in? So there's a difference. There's two forms of remote instruction, really, when you think about it. There is our hybrid model participants. Students are coming to school 2 days a week, and for 3 days a week, they're at home engaging with their studies asynchronously. They don't have to sign in following their class schedule on the days that they're not in school. They have to keep up with their studies though. If a student is participating in full remote instruction for the 2 days that they're assigned, whether they're blue or gold, they do have to log in and follow their day, not lunch or study halls, but they do have to follow their day for virtual instruction. There's some questions around our seniors and senior privileges.
So senior privileges, is the phone off? The senior privileges, I will send that information out. As I said in an earlier message, I really do want to hear from the seniors when they are back. We have some surveys and some forums to engage them in this thinking process before we just arbitrarily decide what we are and are not going to do. We absolutely will give them the guidelines, the limitations, but they're seniors in high school and we want to make this year as meaningful to them as we possibly can. And I can't in good conscience do that without their voice, and I just have not had that opportunity yet. So as that happens, I will absolutely start sending out a senior newsletter, so parents of seniors and senior students will have the updated information to help them plan for the year. I also see a question. Sorry.
You're on mute there, Karyn.
Yep, I got it. There's a question around recording of classes and synchronized versus not synchronized. Do you want to talk a bit about the recording?
Yes, if I may for a second. In some cases, the instructors may be recording classes for short periods in order to help provide that instruction to students in the remote or hybrid models who can't be in the classroom. As we do that, we are working on best practices and guidelines around making sure that those stay internal to the class, only used for educational purposes, don't go any further, and are only temporarily living in the district. After that, those would be destroyed, not used for long-term instruction, anything like that. So yes, possible recording, minimizing the recording of students, and trying to make sure that those do not spread any further than that class for instructional purposes only.
Okay. And then 504 students and students that might need additional support. Ms. Heiman, do you want to talk about that and some of the supports that are offered specifically at Dake?
Sure. So for students with 504 accommodations and a 504 plan, will still be assigned to their cohort group and report to those days of instruction. So if they're in the blue cohort, they would report on Mondays and Thursdays. If they're in the gold cohort, They will report Tuesdays and Fridays. So teachers will have copies of the 504 to ensure that students' accommodations and program requirements are being met. And there will be opportunities for students to engage with teachers, even if it is a remote day for them. So they would need to communicate with their teachers. So open communication will be key for this. To communicate with their teachers, or teachers will reach out to them to schedule some time to either meet virtually, to connect via Schoology or OneNote, to engage in some additional support. And Wednesdays, there's also flexibility for that to occur for all students, whether they are engaging in a hybrid model or in a remote model. Ms. Ryan, did I miss anything that you want to add?
And I think, you know, the accommodations that are on the 504 can also be implemented. So if a student needs extended time or instructions repeated, those will be things that we can work with. I think it would be dependent on that learning task we're asking the student to engage in, and the platform, meaning if it's in person or virtual.
Okay. Let's see, we talked a bit about some of the staggered passing times. You know, just again, Dake, another question around students in groupings, right? So we know on our blue gold, we're basically splitting the volume of the building in half. So at Dake, roughly about 600 students in a typical fall opening. We're going to cut that in half to 300. We know that there's about 100 students or so from Dake that are opting into full remote instruction. And so then even within that, Maryanne, you want to talk a bit about how teams factor in and how that limits some of the intermingling of Dake students.
Mm-hmm. So we are able to cohort by grade as well at Dake. So for our mixed grade classes, so that would be lunches, PE, some of our support classes are typically a mixed grade level. So we are working right now on scheduling to separate students by grade. So they'll not only be cohorted by blue gold, but within the blue gold, they'll be cohorted by grade level. And then within there, we have our GEM team. So students typically engage in their core instruction with a GEM team teacher. There are some sections that are mixed teams, so it won't be a true cohort by GEM, but much of the day will be spent with students in their GEM team. While those students will vary between class and class, that's another way that we are able to group students within the structure of Dake's schedule.
Okay, so I think we're a bit over time, right? We had an end at 7:30, and there have been so many great questions, and really we so appreciate all of the support. This is our maybe third or fourth Q&A session. There's lots of resources posted on the district website under the reopening page. Mr. DeVeronica will chime in a minute to give us that information. This recording is going to be posted or available too, so that folks can rewatch. We're greatly looking forward to some meetings coming up with our faculties tomorrow at the secondary level, in addition to a meeting with our 9-12 students to answer some of their questions as well. So those resources will be posted there for you. And in terms of tonight's, we'll just do that kind of cross comparison. If there were any new questions that came out tonight that weren't previously brought up, we'll make sure that we highlight those.
Ms. Finter, I just want to say, if there are questions that folks really want answered that weren't answered, you can email me and we will get those to the right people. But I can tell you, looking through all the questions, there are lots of repeats, and there's about, usually about 14 pages of them. So it's real simple. You can find my email address on the website, Jeffrey_DeVeronica at westiron.monroe.edu. If I could type that out and show you, I would. Yeah, we'll post the recording later tonight so every family can watch it. And if you have a pressing question you want answered, please email me and we will get that taken care of for you.
Yeah, and please know, we are here for you. Our Administrative team at the 7-12 level, the building principals have been phenomenal responding to student and family questions. Our Department of Student Services, with the good Mrs. Ryan and Dr. Flood, are also available to ask questions of, and we'll do our best to try to track down responses. I know I had a lot of great conversations with parents as they were trying to navigate the difference between, full remote instruction and hybrid hybrid instruction rather. And so we're really here for you and want to help answer your questions and really start the year off as successfully and safely as possible. So we thank you again for your time tonight. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing our students, whether it's in person or virtually, in just a few short weeks. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.